All right, so let's get things rolling here. This is going to be lab number 23. Hard to believe, but it is lab number 23. We are going to cover bus-to-bus workflows again, but we are really going to throw the monkey wrench at it here and talk about how to do all kinds of different parallel compressions, parallel processing, and all the impact that that has on automatic delay compensation and places where you have to do manual delay compensation, all of those things that go together, as we know. This will be, this is kind of aimed at guys that really want to deal with this problem or this challenge. I should just label it as a challenge. I feel it's necessary. I hear guys out in the field that do not address this in any way, shape, or form. They just say, just use your ears, and if it sounds fine to you, just go on. I do use my ears, and I can tell you this: without this sorted out, the mixes don't sound right to me, and the processing definitely doesn't sound right to me. So. Hence the need to share this information and get it out there and get you guys at least thinking in this way and trying to find ways to manage it. Now, one of the coolest things that we've had, at least in my world, that's come along in the last few months is that S6L now offers automatic delay compensation, and it covers a lot of stuff in the console. It's the first live sound console to offer it, where it's where we're dealing with external DSP processing, all kinds of things, and it will do some management of those latencies to keep things in time. Okay, so, but that said, there are also times when you have to do manual delay compensation depending on what you're doing, depending on how complex your routing is. Hopefully it can be pretty simple, or you can come up with pretty simple ways to manage it. All right, so let's get to it here. Today's lab, we are going to talk about, one thing we're going to do is kind of re-examine the group definitions. Between lab 22 and lab 23, I just got to kind of thinking, I was like, you know what, we need to actually do a little better job of defining this, because it's going to help define why we want to do some of the things we're going to do here. All right, so we'll do that. We're going to examine parallel compression and delay compensation definitions. We're going to examine, I'm hesitant to say all the parallel possibilities for parallel compression, but we're going to examine a whole bunch of them, that's for sure, and especially when using bus-to-bus workflows, right? And then we're going to examine the best possible ADC and MDC schemes and demonstrate some best practices for effects processing, all right? Because that's where it really gets messy, is when you're, I'll give away a little bit of the show here. When you're doing parallel processing and you're doing parallel compression, one of the things that is desired out of that is to be able to send both the unprocessed and the processed signal, the compressed signal, to the effects processor, right? To a reverb, a plate, a room, whatever. That is a big part of creating that really cool sound, especially so with drums, but even with other instrumentations as well. The parallel process into the reverb or the effects processor is really important. But that's where things really get hairy. That's where it starts to get really unwieldy without some help from some automatic delay compensation. Okay? All right, so let's do a little bit of refinement here in terms of these definitions that I gave you last week. Obviously, I shared these with you last week: input groups versus subgroup masters versus grandmasters. But as I started to get this put together, I started thinking, really we need to add to this definition a little bit so that we understand the agenda, or the reason that we want to go through some of these processes in the first place. And the first one I'm going to add for you is stem mix, right? So the subgroup is the equivalent of a stem, or it can be the equivalent of a stem. And kind of, for me, what separates those two things is that a stem mix is all-encompassing, meaning if you want to, if you're going to provide someone a stem mix of the drums, that should include your parallel processing, and then it should include your effects processing. All of that should be together in that stem, meaning there's a central location for all of that. We don't want, ideally, you don't want to necessarily send somebody 2 or 3 different stems just to cover the drums, right? In addition to that, if we're going to have a subgroups master, then we're going to have a stems master, right? Or we could have a stems master, where all of these compartmentalized stems that we're going to build go through one master, and we could reprocess there again if we want to do it. But ahead of that, we can send those stem masters somewhere else for processing at a local level somewhere else. And then, of course, grandmaster really doesn't change in this context. All right, so to give you an idea of what I'm talking about here, this is kind of what I mean, right? So even though we've got inputs and we've got input groups here, like we've got a kick drum group, a snare drum group, etc., what we ultimately want to create here is a set of stems, right? I have a drum stem, a bass stem, a guitar stem, a keyboard stem, a DAW stem, maybe even a vocal stem, all right? And as you can see, I've got masters built up for those two areas, vocals and instrument groups. But what I want to be able to do as well is send these stems other places. Maybe I want to record the stems. And you know, maybe if the question even comes up, why would you want to record stems? Well, I want to record stems in addition to all of the regular inputs, right? So if I'm recording 96 inputs, I might record another 16 stems. And what you're going to do is let somebody in post actually assemble mixes very quickly if they needed to do it. Like they could take all of those instrument stems, put them together and create music very quickly without having to remix the whole thing, and then add vocals and add vocal processing to it. They might even just add your vocal stem and be done with it, all right? So this is something that came out of the recording world for sure, and it really kind of grabbed hold when the recording, you know, when music started making its way into film. Then film guys in post would ask for stems, so they might put up a piece of music that didn't have the vocal, things like that, for, you know, dramatic parts of the movie. But we should be doing it as well in our recordings. I do this all the time in my recordings, where if I'm going to give them multi-track inputs, I'm also going to give them stems of my groups as well. All right. The other reason for doing it is you might want to be sending it out to a remote truck. We did this for years and years and years on Petty, very, very successfully, where the remote truck got all the inputs, but we would also give them stems of all the instrument groups, and then they would just add vocals to it as needed for the broadcast, right? It became very easy. All of my moves, all of my mix moves, all of my effects processing changes, etc., were encompassed in those stems, so it made their life very easy and made for some pretty dang good sounding mixes, right? So that's the idea behind getting that stem mentality into this discussion, all right? Is that making sense to everybody? Just give me a thumbs up or something in your windows if you see it there. That's great. Okay. Let's see here. All right, so we're also going to do some definition of some other terms here before we get too far into this. And let's just define parallel compression. So parallel compression is nothing more than the balancing of two signals, right? One with compression and one without, and it can be any percentage of each. Right, so that by definition is parallel compression. And as you know, as you might know or might not know, I'll point it out a couple of times throughout this presentation. With the latest software version in Venue, we now have the ability to parallel compress at the inputs, at the auxiliaries, at the groups, at every stage of the console, all the way out to the master section. If you want to parallel compress your master bus, you can do it just by a wet-dry blend of a compressor. So that makes it a very, very easy way to do it. Now, in terms of just doing it for mixing music, etc., you know, we have things that we want to do in particular sometimes to that, and it's more than just parallel compression. And that's where we get into things like New York style parallel compression, which is actually a series of processing that is in parallel with the source, right? So we might have EQ plus tape saturation plus compression, and we want to manipulate those three things and add them back into the source signals. So usually that requires some parallel busing to do that, etc. So that, you know, that's what I'm going to be showing you today, how to get some New York style parallel compressions in place and keep it compartmentalized here. MDC is for manual delay compensation, meaning you're going to have to manually manipulate time on a pathway somewhere to get your signals impulse back together and get the aggregate of all your signal inputs and impulse to be good, right? We don't want to have one set of inputs that are really good in terms of their impulse, but then another set of inputs that are lagging or leading, etc., especially so when we're mixing music. You know, if we're just doing dialogue and stuff, not quite as, as concerning, but when we're mixing music, we're, phase, frequency response, frequency addition, all of those things count within the context of music. I think, at least my belief, you have to really, really pay attention to this, right, and get this right. Automatic delay compensation, obviously it comes in many different forms. All the console manufacturers offer different levels of it with their systems. But the thing to really understand here, and again, I'll try to drive this home a couple of times, please don't fall into the trap of just thinking, what I need to do is just turn on all the automatic delay compensation features and just go to work. That's not necessarily going to handle everything you want to do. You need to understand what parts of the ADC handle what parts of the console. All right. So it's a brave new world out there, my friends. I mean, this is complex stuff, and nobody's got it sorted out at the live sound level, which is an incredibly complex version of this compared even to our recording buddies in the DAW world. What we would require out of automatic delay compensation in the live sound world is infinitely more complex than what they would need. All right. So, because we have a lot of different workflows, right? We have monitor workflows, front of house workflows, broadcast workflows, all kinds of things that are going to deal with this. So it's not a one push button fixes all at this point, unfortunately. Maybe we'll get to that point in the future, but as of right now, it's not that. This is a term that you venue users might have heard in the past, which is a forced align channel, which we're actually going to take a moment and start thinking like the computer, hopefully, and then manipulate that computer to do some things that we want it to do by forcing it to do some alignment. All right. So today's presentation really doesn't use very much of this. And the nice thing about this, once we got ADC into play, I find very few situations where I actually have to do this anymore. But you need to know that it exists and need to know that how it works. Okay. All right. So enough of the verbiage. Let's get to the pictures. Let's see what we got next. All right. So really, as I mentioned earlier, this is kind of the place to probably drive home that you have the ability today, without doing any parallel, New York style parallel compression, to do compression at any one of these, any or all of these stages, if you want to do it. You could do, a percentage of wet versus a percentage of dry compression and limiting at any one of these stages today in Venue. It's something we put in Venue 7, and really our goal was to put it in there to help out with object-oriented mixing for immersive, where you may not be using a bus, right? You may just be using the direct outputs of any given stage here as an object feed to your DSP processor. So, we wanted to give the ability to easily at least parallel compress those if you wanted to do it. Okay? I'm going to grab a drink. Stand by. All right. So where do we go from here? Let's see. Right now, here's where it's going to get interesting for you guys. And I'll fully cop to the fact that I'm in exploratory mode with this. Even though this has been out a year already, I keep finding things where I just think, oh wow, that's actually better. Let's do things that way. And one of the things I talked to you a little bit about last week or last lab was the concept of using. Instead of creating an actual parallel process of where you go out of a bus to a processor, out of a processor, back to a fader, right? An input fader, just like we would do in analog. In digital, we don't really have to do that. And this is where we're going to absorb some love from our DAW brothers, where we're going to actually do things a little differently. Now, we can still do that in digital consoles today. I won't speak for every digital console, but I know Venue can do this, where we can actually take a bus out of an auxiliary to a processor, like a delay or reverb, whatever, and then return it to a channel and create that kind of traditional setup of a series parallel process, right? And we could also do that with a direct out. Now, here's the important part, right? We also have the ability to do, with the ADC in Venue, do compensation for bus-fed plugins. And when it talks about doing compensation for bus-fed plugins, it's talking about this example on the left, right, where we have a bus out to a plugin and then back to a channel. However, that does not cover direct outputs, right? Only a bus output. So you can take a direct out to a processor here, et cetera, and the delay compensation would not handle that. It would not address that. It would not see that, okay? So you can still do this. There are times when you might want to do this, but I think if we're getting into group processing, at least this has been my discovery so far, if we're getting into group processing and bus-to-bus processing, you're much better off doing this kind of arrangement for your processing, where you actually insert the processing on the bus master, right? And that way you have the process and a return fader. You can even have it be a send fader if you want it to be by putting it in the post fader or post fader insert slot. But more often than not, you're going to have it in pre fader for a lot of these applications here. And what this is going to allow us to do is do really easy bus to bus, right? So if we have an effects return, or an aux master that's got a reverb return on it or a delay return on it, and we want to send that somewhere else, it's very easily done now. We can send that to a group, we can send it to another aux, we can send it to the left-right master, anything we want to do. And that's part of the gold that came with bus-to-bus workflows, okay? So this is an important kind of changeover for guys, and I'll take the time to say it right now, even though I'm going to reaffirm it at the end. In my opinion, if you're going to set up your consoles to do effects processing, etc., pick one of these options, right? And I'll just tell you ahead of time. Let me go back to this. If we're going to use this, and I'll just talk about the one on the left. The one on the right can still be in play. But if you're going to use the one on the left to do your effects processing, you're probably not going to want to use this in conjunction with grouping, right? That's where it starts to really make the ADC challenging. And you're going to find that you're going to have a really hard time getting it all really in phase. It's going to be challenging for you. But that said, if you're not using grouping, if you're just using the left-right bus, you're just taking inputs to the left-right bus, assigning them out to, driving those inputs up into an aux and returning it and using the bus-fed ADC, that works totally fine. But the minute you start implementing a group tier in here, then I'm really going to suggest that you go to this. Okay? It's just going to make things more straightforward. Now, we got a long way to go today. Hopefully, I'm going to reiterate and readdress some of these things with you as we go along. Okay? All right, so let's get to our first example here. Let me make sure I'm on the right snapshot here. I actually had a couple of late discoveries this morning where I was like, uh-oh, I better figure this out. All right, so this is kind of what I was talking about if we're going to use the, all inputs assigned to a left-right bus, and then also do a series parallel effects process here, right? Or actually, in this situation, it's just parallel compression. And you guys have probably seen this from the earlier versions of Venue. This is we were the first company to really actually even offer this as a parallel compression process that was in phase at the console. So in this situation, there's no type of manual delay compensation that can address this and get these two things in phase, because if you try to adjust the time on the parallel compression, well, it's already later than the inputs, so we can't add delay there. If we add delay to the inputs, then it pushes out the signals going to the parallel compression and would make it later. They would stay out of phase here, right? So if you have delay compensation on in your console that can handle this, this works just fine. And in the latest version of Venue that has input alignment and bus-fed plug-in alignment on it, this now makes Venue work exactly like an analog console. This is exactly how you would do it in analog, and Venue, in terms of busing and phase, would act exactly like an analog console here, right? So I'll show you this. Let me get over here. So I've got this set up on the console where you can see it. Oops, over here. Let's see here. Actually, let me do, yeah, that's all right. Do that. All right, so you can see it's a really clean impulse there. Let me get the overhead camera on here. Get some of this where you can see it. Okay, so just to outline it here, I have a set of inputs down here. These are the inputs that are actually going out to the parallel comp, right? And that is this auxiliary. So these inputs are going to this auxiliary. These inputs are also going to the left-right. This auxiliary is already also going to the left-right. And as you can see, those two things are in phase, right? Oops, let's do this one. As you can see, those two things are in phase. Now, the important thing to remember here, too, is that I actually have input plugins on right now, right? I have insert processing on these inputs. So it's aligning those and aligning the two paths to get it back to good impulse, right? So this is really a cool thing, certainly in the most recent release of Venue. So if you're working just strictly to the left-right bus, you can have a really good time here. Okay, and that requires, just to give you some idea of what we're talking about here in terms of ADC and MDC considerations. Christopher, I see your hand. I'm sorry, I'll be right with you. What I'm alluding to down here is this. And I'm sorry for being so venue-centric here for you guys that are not venue, but we'll do this here. So all of this that is in the lower right-hand corner here where you see it says ADC settings and MDC settings, what that is referring to is these settings in the Venue console, right? So you'll notice here we have align input channels to mains and matrices. That's one of our options. And then the second option is compensate for bus-fed plugins to the mains and the matrices. All right, so we have both of those checked here. So you can see on my little ledger here, they're both in green. So that's the idea. That's going to tell you where we are in terms of those settings. And in this situation, this all works out good. All right, Christopher, sorry, I see your hand has probably been up for a while. Jump in there. If we have to backtrack a little bit, that's cool, man. No problem.
I'm just curious, is with the automatic delay compensation, is there anywhere the console shows how much delay it's doing?
It does not. It does not, because it's and honestly, I've asked for that to happen. I want that to kind of be one of the next developments of this, is to let us know how big the buffer is on the console and how much delay compensation has been added. As it sits right now, as you build things out and get more buffer built into the console, if you need to know the throughput, you'll have to measure it.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thanks. Okay. All right, so does this make sense to everybody, what's going on right here? I mean, like I said, this is a pretty straightforward one. So the question then becomes, what do we do when we get to effects processing, right? Well, we still have some challenges there, believe it or not, because remember, our agenda is how do we get input sources and parallel compressed sources to that effects processor. And this is one that can't be handled by the ADC currently, right? If you're in these settings, if you're in input alignment plus bus-fed plugins, because what we're going to do is once we choose it, right, we can say, okay, I can have input, or I can have the output of the compressed return that's going to that effects processor. I get either or, right? If I try to add them together, then I've got challenges because the source going into the reverb is actually going to be comb filtered. Those two places are not aligned before it gets to the effects processor. So let me see if I can demonstrate this here. Okay, so let me get smart up where you can see it. Don't let the little upshift fool you there. It's just an alignment because I'm working smart at 48K and Venue at 96K, so don't let it fool you. That's just a misalignment between computer and console. But what we see there is just the impulse of the left-right bus against pink noise, right? So we can see there's no comb filtering in that. And what we have up right now is the effects return, as you can see here. That's the effects return. And the parallel compression, right? So here's our inputs up. Here's our parallel compression being added with it. And here's our effects return being added with it. And the effects return is in bypass right now, as you can see. And that's all fine, right? Even if we listen to the input to the effects processor, it sounds good there. But as soon as we add in...
overhead camera, Robert.
Sorry, say it again?
We don't see your overhead camera.
Yes. Thank you. There we go. Sorry about that. All right, so let me see how I can show this. All right, so that's inputs to the left, right. This is the compressed set to the left, right. We can see phase stays good there. And I've got my return here. Remember, this is a series parallel return. This is the effects processor, and I've just got it in bypass just so we can show time, right? And you can see it's great. It actually comes back right in time with the source, and you would be led to believe, hey, that's great. Everything is good right now. But I'm only sending either the source material or the compressed return to the plug-in. As soon as I send both of those, then I've got some phase problems again. And I'll show this just by soloing the effects return. So I'm going to solo the effects return now, and I'm going to add that send from the compressor, right? And so now I've got compressed drums and uncompressed drums going to the processor, and you can see it's comb filtered at the input of it now. It's not a great deal of it, but enough to mess with it for sure. Your reverb's going to sound very dull here because the things that we are sending to it are comb filtered, right? And there's no way to address this right now. We have no ability to delay and get in alignment the input signals to that processor. Right, so we have to choose one or the other here. We're kind of between the rock and the hard spot. So even though, the delay compensation handles the bus part of it, right, it still doesn't give you the ability to add those two signals together and get them to the reverb, which is one of our agendas, right? That's one of the things we want to do. Everybody with me so far? This is the easy one, by the way. Oh. Wait till you see where we're going. Okay, so I'll stop there for a second. Any questions on that before I go on? Do you understand the concept there that I can't have both of these things going to that effects master, that effects aux, and have them be in phase, right? The input to that reverb plugin will be out of phase. You'll have some comb filtering in that. All good? Give me some thumbs up if that's all right. Everybody getting that? All right, I see some shaking heads, maybe not so much. Okay, good. All right, so let's go, let's try another process here. And this time we're going to create a bridge channel. I used to promote this to people all the time if you wanted to do this. This was a way to kind of get these things in play. But this is where ADC can kind of mess with you a little bit here. So let me get to that point here. All right, so as you can see here, we've taken one auxiliary master out to two plugins that are just used as a bridge, right? Those are just a bridge to get back to two more channels, right? This can just be a delay or what's the heck is the plugin called? Delay adjuster plugin, just to create the bridge, right? Where we've got to go out of that aux to a plugin and then return that plugin to two channels. Now, kind of the cool thing about this with the input alignment and the bus fed alignment, right? It's going to do a good job of aligning those two inputs. Let me get maybe some annotation here to maybe it'll help us along here. Let's try this. So, ADC is actually going to handle these two guys pretty good, right? Even though, we got like the KST comp thing there, that there's lots of plugins installed on that, even though I don't show it there. So it would actually handle that pretty good. But, we want to be able to get those things to that reverb in time as well. And it kind of messes with it here. Let me see if I got this right. This doesn't look right to me. Okay, so what I was about to say was, if we take a look now, we've got inputs that are assigned only to the left-right bus through two channels, right? So let me get the annotation off of here. I'll try to point this out. So just a reminder back here, right? We're going to have these inputs are not assigned to the left-right bus. So we've got our kick, snare, and toms not assigned to the left-right bus, but they are all traveling through an aux, going through two plugins and returning back to two channels. One is a bridge channel, meaning this is how the kick, snare, and toms are going to get to the left-right bus. The other is the compressed set, right? This is where we're going to do our New York style parallel compression. So we have uncompressed kick, snare, and toms going to left-right, and highly compressed kick, snare, and toms that is going to left-right. We have our input alignment and our bus fed plug-in alignment in play. And as you can see here, hopefully, do it this way. This is in phase, right? So the console handles this beautifully. It handles the alignment of that KST, that kick, snare, tom bridge channel, and the parallel compression fine. It puts them in phase. What we do need to do manual alignment on is anything that does not take that path now, right? So if we have cymbals, we have other inputs that is not going through that auxiliary to get to the left-right, they're just going straight to the left-right, we will have to do some MDC on that if we want to get those back in time. Because we've created this extra path now, it's not going to put those things in alignment. And, you know, this has kind of been the way since the early days of Venue. Even our initial, what we call legacy ADC now, would not have aligned this situation, right? Where you have a set of inputs that are going to a group and a set of inputs that are going to the left, right. You know, if those two paths were not in common, it wouldn't put them in alignment, right? So a similar situation here. All right, so where it starts to get tricky, though, again, is when we go to effects processing for this. So I'll push the button like I'm supposed to and get to the next. Okay, so in this situation, the idea, again, our agenda would be, if we could do it, to get uncompressed drums and compressed drums going to that effects aux master and getting them processed. Now remember, we've got a serial parallel built here again, right? Where we're going to go out of the aux master to the plugin and return it to a channel and then add it back with everything. All right, so that's the situation I've got here. So again, we're going to be in this situation though where we can't get both there. We can either get just the input side or just the parallel compressed side there to get them in phase. And here's where ADC actually kind of hurts you a little bit, okay? Because what we're going to do is this. Let's go back to this real quick. So here's our inputs. Here's our auxiliary, our master auxiliary that is going to the KST channel. This is our kick, snare, and toms to the left-right bus. This is the compress set to the left-right bus. And as it stands right now, those three things are in phase to the left-right bus. I'm going to mute this out for a second. And you can hear that's in phase, right? So our kick, snare, and toms and our parallel kick, snare, and toms are in phase. But if we were to listen to that, if we were to put both of those to the aux bus, right, so I'm going to send them both there, except they are, and then we solo that return, you can hear it's terribly comb filtered, right? So that's what the input to your reverb would sound like. It would make the reverb sound really awful. But if we take one of them out, let's just take this one out, we can hear it comes back to full frequency response. Now, the challenge with it is, if we thought, okay, well, maybe we just need to do some alignment of the kick, snare, tom channel and that spank channel, right? Let's do some manual alignment of that so that it'll be in phase going up to the bus. Okay, well, let's do that. So, go back to this. So here's our comb filter. Now, all I'm going to do is add delay to the kick, snare, and tom bridge that is going to the left, right. And you can hear it comes back in phase. But this is only the input to the reverb that we're listening to right now, right? Now, if we go back and listen to just our regular phase, it's all comb filtered, right? And that is because even though ADC is in place, we've added delay to this. And ADC says, oh, you must be adding that for an acoustic alignment here. I'm going to let you have that delay additionally to the automatic alignment. So again, you're kind of in this, between this rock and a hard spot of being able to delay, get them in phase to the left-right bus, but get both of these in phase to an aux bus, right? And a lot of this is driven by using that bus-fed parallel ADC that happens there. You know, that's the challenge here, because it kind of gets confused on what it should be doing here. Right? So you can, I don't want to lead you to believe you can't do these kind of things, but if you're trying to do this bridge channel with ADC on, you're going to run into all kinds of challenges there. If you're going to do this, I know this is going to be unsettling, but you're almost better off going back to full manual delay compensation, or conceding that you will only ever get one or the other to the effects processor. You'll only either get the input sources or the compress set to the effects processor. If you want to use the ADC portion. Okay. Anybody need a second drink of coffee yet? Maybe a second amphetamine? Right. Yeah. These are things we really don't want to be thinking about, but unfortunately we have to. All right. Any questions on that so far? Honestly, it gets easier as we go forward here, believe it or not. So.
You say that you can only use either or, meaning inputs or KST comp. Could you do kick, snare, tom unprocessed instead of the compressed?
Yeah,
one?
you could choose that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could choose that here. Like I've got it set up where I'm sending it either from here or from here. Right? So you could do this to the reverb or this to the reverb. Or
yes, but
this to the reverb.
Yeah, so you couldn't use the inputs and the non. Okay, good.
Yeah, I think personally, it would make more sense to me anyway to take, if I'm just going to send uncompressed to the reverb, to do it from here as opposed to here.
Yeah.
I mean, you could reblend it here, but if you do it from here and you turn this down, you're still going to hear drums going to your reverb.
Yes.
Right. Now, here's another thing to think about. And, you know, really in the earlier days of doing this, when I was doing complete manual delay compensation, my goal for this was to be able to get compressed and uncompressed signals up to the buses as much as anything for, you know, effects processing, but also for subwoofers, right? I wanted to be able to send, you know, uncompressed drums and compressed drums to the subs as well. Now, we get a little bit of luck here, right? Where the offset between these two inputs is not enough to get it down into the sub pass band, right? So we could just accept these two cancellations and send out an aux to a subwoofer system and still be okay, because the cancellation's above the pass band, right? But to a reverb, definitely not. You know, that reverb's going to sound really uninteresting if you do it this way. And I'll fully cop to it. In the very early days of Venue, when I started doing this kind of thing, showing another example here, it caught me, and I couldn't figure out what it was. And it was that offset between those two buses going to my reverb. Couldn't figure out why the reverb sounded so bad. It was like, what am I doing here? But that was it. Took me a while to find it. All right, let's see here. Where are we? We are here. All right, so yeah, let's carry on here. Unless you guys got more questions on that. I hope everybody's staying up on this. I don't feel like I'm explaining it all that well, but hope you guys are okay there. All right, so let's move on to this guy, I think. Yes. All right, so here's where the first place where we're going to do this changeover, right? Where we're going to, instead of doing these serial parallel or parallel serial, however you want to think of it, where we, you know, go out to a plugin and then return to a channel, etc. We're just going to install the plugins on the auxiliary itself here, right? So in this situation, we've got our source inputs assigned to the left-right bus. We've got the inputs that we want to parallel compress assigned to an auxiliary, up to an auxiliary, but they're also still going to the left-right bus. And then on that auxiliary, we're going to insert our processing, right? So let me get to the next thing here. Just study that drawing for a second. All right, so in this situation, I'll pull up the smart so you can prove it. So here is the, if you watch the, this line here, If you watch the magnitude line on Smart, you'll be able to see me adding and subtracting things here. Where is my... So keep your eyes on, obviously on phase, but also on this line here on Smart, the magnitude display. All right. So I'm going to take away everything else. So that's just the source drums going to the left, right? And you can see the impulse up there in the top window. And now I'm going to add the compressed drums to it that are inserted on that aux, sent to on an aux, and you can see that all stays in phase. Great. I'm going to add other inputs here, which are hi-hat, overheads, etc., even some other channels outside of that, and you can see all of that stays great, right? So there's a great way to do parallel processing right there and keep it all in phase. You're all really, really good there. And in this situation, though, what we can do is turn off the bus-fed plug-in alignment. You can kind of see that. I've got it turned off here, right? So that can be turned off, and there's no manual delay compensation to achieve this, right? This is a very easy way to do this, okay? All right, clear that. All right, so let's try to get some effects processing in there now and see how we do with this. And unfortunately, we're kind of back to the rock and the hard spot here. So we have input alignment on, we have the other bits on, and we're back to this choice though again, which is really kind of a bummer, you know. Let's see, am I right here? So we kind of have the same thing here because those two, you know, those sources are taking two different paths here. So this, again, cleans things up dramatically, but it does not solve this dilemma, right? We haven't got that dilemma solved yet. All right, so what we're going to do now, we're going to take it one step further, and we're actually going to create kind of a bridge aux. All right, so in this situation, we've got our kick, snare, and toms going to two auxiliaries now, right? We've got one aux that is unprocessed. It's just going straight to the left-right bus. And we've got one parallel comp aux that's got our compression inserted on it, etc. And then, of course, we've got other inputs like cymbals, other inputs going to the left-right bus that I believe have to be compensated, yes. All right, so in this situation, we've kind of we've fixed a few things here because as we get to effects processing, what we're going to see is that the effects processor can get some in-phase signal now, but now we've got to deal with some inputs here and get them aligned back to these other channels if we care about that. I would certainly care about the cymbals and the hi-hat and the overhead here. I would pay really close attention there. You might get away with other inputs not being delayed here to get back to it. It's really up to you to make that choice at this point. But notice the bus-fed plug-in alignment is off. There is some MDC that is required here, and the input alignment feature is on. Because remember, I have plugins on those inputs, on those drum inputs as well, so it's going to align those things. All right, so if you want to see this on Smart, again, we got that little bit of misalignment there. Don't let it bug you between console and computer, but you can see that it's a good impulse there, right? Regardless of whether we have just the regular inputs up or the aux bridge and the parallel. So again, this is a good way to do it. All right, so let's go to the next one here. All right, actually, yeah, we're just gonna talk about this one for a second. So if you're kind of familiar with Venue Land, right, you might remember that we actually did something like this very similar in the early days of Venue, right? Because really all we've done is create an uncompressed set and a compressed set at a group level. We're just using an auxiliary to do it right now, right? This is very similar to what we used to do with Venue here, where we would have a compressed set of drums and a non-compressed set of drums all going out, right? But even this got to be a challenge in terms of how to process it, right? Certainly, the bummer about this is that we've broken away from the stem concept, right? Now we no longer have a drum stem per se. And, it's definitely going to require some FAC to do this. That was one of the challenges that we had with this, and finally figured out a way to do it with this concept of FAC, where we have a forced align channel, where we're going to take one channel unused, never gets signal, and assign it to both groups, and then also assign it to the left right. And once the computer sees that, it's actually going to align those two groups for us. All right. But we still have the same problem with effects processing, right? Where we have either or. We can either take, we couldn't really do it until we broke it out to another, to an effects matrix here, right? Because in the previous venue, we didn't have bus to bus, so we had no way to get compressed drums to an auxiliary. So we ended up having to use a matrix there, right? So we would use a matrix to add together compressed drums and add that with an auxiliary, and then send that out in a serial fashion to an effects processor. But you had the same problem here, where if you didn't do the MDC on the aux here, those two signals were out of phase going to the effects matrix. This is the one that caught me for quite a while in my earliest days with Venue, thinking I was being slick figuring out how to do this, but I wasn't really all the way there yet. But you could impart some delay on that auxiliary master. You'd had to use a plugin to do it, but that would get your signals back in phase going to your reverb or your room or whatever you're doing, right? So really, my point of bringing it up is it really isn't all that much different to this, right? But there's you don't need FTC. This was all legacy, with the new ADC situation. The challenge here was that if you had input processing, if you had input inserts, none of that was aligned. You would have to do that manually if you cared about that sort of thing. Okay. All right, so let's get back to our snapshots and stuff. I believe this is us. Right. Okay, so here we are now. Okay, so in this situation, we've got inputs and inputs going to our bridge aux. We've got that double aux thing there where we've got an auxiliary that's representing our parallel compressed drums and one that's not. And we're going to do a little bit of MDC there. We have to do that. We have to get those two things in alignment here because we're going to send them up to another bus. Now, in the previous example, we didn't do this because we were not going to send them anywhere but the left-right bus. But now that we're going to take those two auxes and send them to another bus, it actually demands that we do some alignment here. And unlike the previous alignment where we were doing alignments of inputs, remember where we did that KST and spank set, and it got out of phase to the left-right bus where it detected that as, oh, that must be an acoustic alignment you're doing there. I'm going to let you do that. ADC would never see you doing two auxes as an acoustic alignment, so it's going to allow you to put the delay in there. All right. So in this situation, we're actually going to put some delay in there, and it actually becomes very easy in terms of how to figure out this delay here. So I'm going to go to those outputs. Let's see, that's this guy and this guy. All right, so as you can see here, this is our bridge aux that I have here. There are no plugins in it. But if I go to the spank aux, I have all the plugins in play here. And if I just right click up here, it's going to tell me that that spank aux, that compression aux, is 129 samples of throughput. All right. So then we're going to go back to that bridge aux, and as you can see right here, I'm just going to put 129 samples of delay in it and get those things to have equal path length there. Right. So 129 samples is what was required there to get those two auxes in phase with each other. And here's kind of the cool part, right? So now if we listen to the left-right bus, it's in phase. I can turn one on or off. If I take that delay out, it really doesn't matter, right? It doesn't impact our left-right bus, which is really cool. But what it does impact is the next stage of auxes. So I'm going to turn on the effects return now. And we just listen to that. So we're listening to the effects return now, the input to the effects return. And if I take that delay of the aux bridge off, you can hear it 100%. So all of this is in phase now. If we were to listen to that reverb as actual reverb, if you guys are listening in stereo, you'll be able to hear this. I'll push up the reverb. It's just going to come up on the left-hand, right-hand side, right? And hear it come out there. It just sounds just fine. Phase it. It's gonna be great. For you guys that are listening in replay, I'm sorry to say that it's going to be in mono. Zoom only records in mono. So won't necessarily get that sense. Okay. So the MDC is required there. Now, here's the other part of it. If you want to get other things like cymbals and other inputs in time here, you're going to have to do some manual delay compensation here at the input stage here. Okay, so as you can see here, this is the aux bridge and the compress set getting up in phase, right? That's all good. And I'm going to add the reverb to it. You can still see that still stays good, right? That's actually absolutely in phase there. But as we add other inputs now, if we're going to add the hi-hat and the overhead, they're showing up early. And if I add other inputs, they're showing up early as well. Can you kind of see that there? Right, so certainly the drum inputs we would want to take care of here. And, you know, the way to do that is just with some simple input delay, right? We're just going to put some input delay in here. And hopefully it's going to work. There we go. So that's just with input delay imparted on those inputs to get the impulse back together. All right. So, you know, the reason I've kind of put this as an option in this particular one, where is my mouse? As you can see here, I've got optional for MDC, and the one in the aux is required, but there's an optional set as well, depending on whether you have bus fed plug alignment on. And again, this is where you kind of have to start learning to think like the computer, right? So let me just show it here. Oops, where are you? Options. Yeah. So I'm going to go to those inputs and take their delay off now. Hopefully I'm right here. And you can see we have the offset, right? It's just saying, hey, something's not right there. But if I turn on compensate for bus fed plugins, then it goes back into alignment because it believes that somewhere you're going to do one of those serial patches, right? It just says, hey, if you're going to do a serial patch, I've got to make sure that all the inputs are in alignment there, right? So it's actually taking care of that for us. Now, it kind of came with no penalty here, but there are times as you do this, as you start to get used to doing this, where if you add that bus fed alignment in there, it's actually increasing the throughput of your console. So again, you kind of have to make a decision here. It's like, well, do I turn bus fed on and increase the overall throughput of my console, or do I turn bus fed off and just align these inputs with some input delay? Kind of your call there. You know, you just kind of have to, again, it's a trade-off, right? So that's why I say this is optional here, right? So that second set of MDC is optional there, depending on what you do, right? Now, probably as good a time as any to say this. Remember, guys, this is not a showstopper. You know, the show is going to happen regardless of whether you get this right. Shows have been going on for 15 years with people having this completely wrong on their consoles. But if you want your audio to sound right, you want it to have analog impulse quality, analog sound quality, this needs to be taken care of in your digital consoles, okay? You need to pay attention to this. And I don't really care how you go about figuring it out, whether you're going to do it with an FFT, you're going to do it just with phase cancellation and, you know, create cancellation with, you know, adjust time until the cancellation happens, etc. Don't really care. But in my mind, you want to have some quality audio, you have to take care of these kind of things and be aware of them. Be aware that they're going on in your console. Let's see here. Yeah, I think I'm here.
While you're
Gary,
flipping through, yeah, could this be the reason why people say that digital doesn't sound good, analog is much better? It's just they haven't figured these out when digital came around, and then
you've stumbled upon my mantra. I have been saying this I've been preaching this for, boy, since the S3L days, about 5, 6, 7 years now, that it is my belief, I'm just going to go on record as saying it here, it is my belief that this was at the heart of why people were not digging digital. And it was certainly at the heart of why they were not digging plugins. Because I'll stand by it. The plugins in and of themselves sound great. But if you use them poorly and have their use destroy the impulse of your mix or just degrade the impulse of your mix, I mean, it's it's kind of a weird thing. You could have somebody where you just say, wow, I went to see the show the other night and they had tons of plugins. I didn't think it sounded very good. But, I've seen guys that use so many plugins that it creates this massive offset. But by the time it gets to the left-right bus, everything's still relatively in phase because they've used so many, right? So, it's kind of a weird mentality. Look, at the end of the day, what I'm trying to preach to you is you've got to pay attention to throughput, especially when you're doing parallel busing and especially when you're doing insert processing that is plugin based, and especially so if it's external DSP plugins. I mean, it's nuance, and we won't have the time for me to get bogged down in the middle of this here, but that's kind of the nuance of Venue. Venue is open to all third-party processing, and it happens in an external DSP, right? It's the only console out there that does that. So, the chances of you messing it up here are good, at least up until the point we had ADC. You had to understand, well, when I insert that processing on the channel, I've moved it in time, right? And, in the earliest days of Venue, before we went to S6L platform where we had segmented DSP versus mix engines, all of it took place on the mix engine, and the offsets were very small. I mean, 2, 3, 4, 5 samples. So you could kind of get away with it. Still wasn't perfect in my opinion, but it wasn't as revealing as it is now. Now you need to be able to take care of this, and it's part of what drove us to put automatic delay compensation in the console to be able to lighten the burden on the engineer to be able to take care of these things, right? Okay, making sense, everybody? All right, let's see what we got next. All right, so we're going to start adding some tiers of groups here and see how the console handles it here. What are we on? 22, yeah. All right, so we're going to add our first tier of input groups, and we're going to kind of commit to this idea of a bridge aux and a PC comp aux. And just to drive the point home, remember last lab we talked about, this all went pretty easy, right? We could stay in phase really well. The automatic delay compensation handled this really, really well, kind of regardless of how much grouping we put in place. But as soon as we start adding parallel compressions, and which is a mult essentially, and parallel processing that includes parallel compression, the whole thing kind of goes, woof, it kind of mushrooms out where you really have to be aware, okay? So in this situation, we've got input groups, we've got symbols, other inputs that make it directly to the left-right bus. Our other groups go to the left-right bus as well. The most important part of this to remember is if you're going to send kick, snare, and toms to both the bridge aux and the PC comp aux, they have to come from the same place, right? You wouldn't want to send some from the input side and then also send some from the input group side. In my opinion, you really wouldn't want to send anything from the input side here to that aux. It's going to be pre-fader of it, right? You could then mute your input groups and still be getting drums to your effects processing or your compression. It would get very, very messy very quickly. So you want to be very discerning here and say, okay, I'm going to take my kick drums, my snare drums, my toms, send those to those two places and parallel process them and get them to the left-right bus, okay? And this is all good. I'll just do it so you can see it. So this is that particular setup going through the bus. So, all of this is the bridge, this is the compressed, this is both. You can see it's completely additive. I have inputs here that have their delay on, and this one ends up being kind of easy on the delay, although I don't have a lot of inserts on these other inputs. If I had no inserts on them, it would just be the same time as the PC comp insert. It would be 100, in this case 129 samples for those inputs as well. If I take the input delay off, you can see it shows up early, right? Input delay back on, and we're all back in impulse, back in phase here. Notice bus fed plug-in alignment is off. The only thing we have on here is input alignment to take care of this. I'll annotate it just to show it, just to show off that I can annotate. So remember, input alignment is taking care of this, right? Of these input inserts. And the 80, that's what the ADC is taking care of. And then we're taking care of the rest, right? Well, we're taking care of the inputs, right? The ADC also handles this part, believe it or not, right? Which is kind of cool, I believe. Let me just check that. Yes. So there's no delay on that aux bridge at this point to get it in time. The ADC handles that. It just says, okay, I see what you're doing there. Good to go. Gear, have you got another question, or did you just leave your hand up?
No, I took it down and put it up again.
Right.
And you were on the spot there, the bridge auxiliary. Can you elaborate a bit about the purpose of that?
It's, as you're going to see here, it's so that we can get effects, get signal both. Let me try to say it again. It's so that we can get uncompressed and compressed signals to the effects processor.
But there is no effects processor.
Well, if you'll let me get to the next slide, I will show it.
Ah,
I'm trying to ease you into this gear. All right, let's just jump to it here. All right, so if we go here, then we need to do some MDC on that bus, right? Oops, that's this. Okay, so in this situation, obviously we need to go back to some MDC here for the aux bridge and the PC comp aux, because it's going to go up to another tier. It's going to go up to another aux, right? But when it was just going to the left-right bus only, the ADC could handle that. It just says, yep, got it. And you know, the thing with ADC, most ADCs work this way too. It takes care of it at the latest point in the path, right? So that alignment was taking place at the left-right master, right? That's why when we add this additional tier to our bridge PC comp or PComp combo here, it says, okay, I'm confused now. You're sending that to the left-right, but you're also sending it up to an aux bus. Which do you want me to align for, right? So in this situation, we have to add that bit of time there. So again, we have that option again, now that we've got this extra tier in. If we turn off the bus fed compensation, let's see here, let me make sure I'm not lying here. No, we still need that input delay to get those in play there. All right, so effects-wise, let's have a look at that. So you can see the effects there. Looks like I got just a little bit of misalignment there, but oh no, it's this. Sorry, there we go. All right, so if you want to listen to it, let's do that. So here is our everything but the effects return. And turning up the effects return, you can see it's perfectly in place. If you listen to the input to the effects, you can hear it is in place. By the way, you're listening and looking there, I believe, at the input. Right, so those auxiliaries, that aux bridge and the PComp are in phase going up to the aux that is feeding the effects processor. Groovy? I know, man. It's a mind bender. I wish I could just say, if you do this, it'll all work. But unfortunately, we're not to that point in history yet. All right, so let's carry on. I'm trying to not keep you too much longer here. All right, so let's add another tier, yet another tier of grouping. And here's where we're finally to our actual drum stem, right? We're going to be able to achieve some drum stemdom here. So actually my required should be green there on MDC. I'm sorry to say. I believe. Let's see here. 24. Yes. Yes, that's right. All right, so because we've added a new tier of bus in the form of the drum stem now, that's going to make us have to do that MDC that is heading up to that drum stem, right? So we're going to have to get our bridge aux and our PC comp aux in play. The nice thing is now that we've added that second tier, we don't have to do the input delay now, right? We've got that, it's kind of a two-tier group now, so we don't really need to do those additional inputs like the cymbals and the other inputs. That'll come through with the ADC now without delay on it. If you want to see that, I'll just do it just to prove it. Okay, so here, let's turn this off. And, all right. So here is the aux bridge. Here is the P comp that is with it. So there's your in phase aux bridge and P comp, and then here's the additional inputs. This is the overhead hi-hats and other inputs, and you can see it all plays right along there. Now it's worth noting that I have inserts, input inserts on those other channels, like the other channels, and I don't have it on hi-hat and overhead here, but it is taking care of input inserts there as well. So it definitely makes it easier. Okay. All right, so short of required not being in green on that slide, everything is good there. But you know, the thing to get across here is the agenda of the stem, right? We've got the stem in play now. We've got our stems in play and in phase. All right, so let's carry on. Let's get to effects with this and see how we do. Again, we're going to have that MDC in play. But once we do, then everything is groovy. Right, Robert? All right, so just to show you all the parts and pieces. Here is the aux bridge. Here is the compress set added with it. Here are hi-hat overheads and other inputs added with it. All phase good. We're going to take the aux bridge and the P comp and send it to the effects processor. I'll just double check myself to make sure I'm right here. Oops. Don't want to do that. Right, and we're going to send it in. And as you can see, that is the effects return. And remember our thing about this, okay? We can have an effects return if it's delay or reverb be late to the initial impulse, and that's what you're seeing with the reverb right now. But once we put it back into play, then everything is going to be okay. I'll let you listen to that just so I can show you what I mean there. Let's see, we need this going to, yeah. Okay, so this is all of our good in-phase signal. This is all the signals added together there. And then I'm going to add in that drum reverb. And hear it come out really nice and wide, left and right. If I solo up the input to the reverb, you can hear that the phase is good there. So as long as we don't have any dry signal in that reverb return, we haven't blended anything on the plugin, we're going to be fine. If we blend in dry signal on that reverb return, we're going to start to get this, right? Because that plugin is actually returning late to the set. But as long as it's delay and reverb and we make it 100% wet, we're golden. Right? We're pretty good, but we'll get away with it. We kind of get a little bit of a break. Okay, making sense, everybody? Starting to see it a little bit now? All right, let's carry on. Let's add another tier now. All right, so here's where we're stems, and we're going to go stems into a stems master, right? Similar sort of process here. 25, 26, yeah. All right, so in this situation, we've got our input drums, we've got stems, and then we're going to break our stems up into two different masters, right? We're going to have a stems master and a vocals stem master, right? You might want to be able to deal with those two things separately. You might want to EQ your music separately, compress your music separately from your vocals, etc. But it's still all going to go to the left-right bus here. So I believe this is good. Yeah. That's off. So in this situation, you know, the kind of the parts and pieces are that we have to have. I got to make sure this is right, because this is where I was struggling a little bit with this before I came on air. So in this situation, we definitely have to have the manual delay comp in our bridge aux and our PC aux. I think this is where we have to do some additional delay, though, that I kind of discovered late. 1 second here. Right. Okay, yeah, so this one comes out good. So obviously you have the required MDC there for that set, but the rest of it is okay, right? And again, you know, you're trying to think compartmentalized here, right? I want to have drums with its processing. I want to have vocals with its processing, etc. All right, so let's carry on to another one. Oh, so yeah, actually, I'm sorry, I'll back up one here. So the difference here is we have the choice now if we want to create a P-bus, right? Does everybody know what a P-bus is? Andrew Sheps has kind of coined this terminology to say it's a parallel bus, very much like New York style compression, for our master bus, right? In this situation, we have kind of two master buses, right? We have an instrument stems master and a vocal stem master. So let's add the concept of a P-bus there, right? So if we add a P-bus, now we've got a parallel bus of vocals and instruments combined together, right? As you can see there, the vocal stems go to the P-bus, the instrument stems go to the P-bus, and as well. So we have kind of vocals, instruments, and P-bus there that contain all. The P-bus contains both instruments and vocals there. So that's all pretty well in phase, but this is one where I believe we have to put some vocal delay in this, or vocal group delay in it. 1 second, I'm going to make sure I'm right here. Again, this was one I was kind of discovering right before I got on air. Right, yeah. So if we're going to do this, if we're going to create that additional tier in parallel, and I'm sorry, I didn't have time to put it in the drawing here, but you actually have to put, let me annotate it so I can show it. You actually have to put some delay via plugin on this group. So you're actually going to have to do some plugin delay right here to get the signals in phase. And they're only slightly out of phase, but if you want to be, kind of cool about it, you have to do it. Now, you can't use the actual group delay because the group delay is being handled by automatic delay compensation. You can just add delay all day long and it won't do anything to it. But if you do it as a plugin here, you can actually change it. So I'm going to go ahead and put that plugin in circuit here now. And this is right where I've got the green square there. This is in that position. All right, so you can see a little bit of the ripple that is being created by that vocal group getting there at a different time. So I'm just going to put that in there. This is just a little bit of plug-in delay, plug-in-based delay, not actual channel delay, to take care of that vocal group time that's being added in there, right? So again, this should drive home to the point to all you guys. If you really, really want to address this, you've got to find a way to be able to look at these things in FFT off your consoles, right? Especially as things get really complex. I mean, let's be honest here. I mean, this is starting to be a very complex workflow here, right? And we're going to make it even a little more complex before we finish here. All right. Let's move on to one more. So let's go. Oh,
I got
yeah.
a question before you go.
Yeah, go.
So, between the last slide and this slide,
yeah,
the only difference I saw was you added the insert stems P bus with the P1
Yeah, that's PI is what the
or PI. Okay,
yeah.
so
And
why
that's
would
it's not insert, it's instruments, right?
okay?
So that means all the drums, the other instruments, anything that is instrument-based stem is going into that P bus. It's a parallel for only the music.
So why does the delay have to go at the vocal stem and not at the vocal stems master?
It could probably go in either place, but I think just in my thinking, I think I'll probably want to do that at the vocal stem here, because really, if you think about, okay, well, if I'm going to print that drum stem, instrument stem, and other instruments, and print the vocal stem, when they go to the actual recorder, I want them to be in time.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah, or they go to the truck, I want them to be in time. So yeah, I'm probably going to do it there. Right. That makes sense to you?
Yep. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So in this situation, let's see where I'm at here. Actually, I got to fix this. 1 second here, guys.
Wait a minute. Now the path just changed.
It's me. Stand by.
Okay. Because this is where I was looking at originally. I was thinking, why wouldn't you put the delay on the line between the instrument stems P bus and the instrument stems master? Because all you've added is that parallel.
Yeah.
So I would have thought that to get it back in alignment, you would have had to delay the original signal.
Well, I'll stick to my same answer. My reason for doing it would be to get the stem print in time with each other. It's, in terms of the end result to the left-right bus, it doesn't make any difference, but the end result to the stem print would make a difference there. All right, so maybe we'll have a little bit of a quick review for this here. Okay, so what I was kind of getting at here was this is really just deciding whether you want your vocal stems master to be part of the P bus, because you may not want it to be there for gain before feedback issues, other stuff. You may not want that kind of processing on that vocal stem master. So in that situation, you might break it out outside of that and just say, well, I'm going to take the vocal stems master and send it directly to the left-right, and then my P bus is only for the music, right? I probably would do it that way, honestly. I don't think I would include my vocals in the P bus mix. Could do it in the studio. I totally buy it there, but in live, I don't know that I would do that just just to be able to be a little more nimble with my music and not impact gain before feedback. I could go crazy doing whatever I wanted to do on music and not impact gain before feedback on the vocals that way, right? And we are 27 there, yes. Okay, so one last one here to discuss, I believe, and that is it this guy? Yeah, this guy. Because I've kind of promoted this in the past. I've worked this way for years and years, of creating, letting the left-right master just be music, and then taking vocals up to the matrices that drive the PA separately, right? So in that situation, I want to be able to. I want to be able to, address music in all kinds of ways. I want to have a master volume for the music. I want to be able to compress, EQ, do whatever I want to do to music and not have it impact vocals, and do that right across the left-right bus. So, with all this bus-to-bus now, it's easier to do this now than it was previously before we had true bus-to-bus. Now, I have the ability to create P-bus, all kinds of things here. So in this situation, you can see I've created P-bus that actually goes to the left-right master, right? So there's instruments and instruments P-bus that goes to the left-right master, but the vocals do not go to the left-right master. So your left-right master is only going to be music, right? And then you're going to mix vocals in with it. In this situation, you definitely have to do some delay in this to get them in time at the matrix, right? And we've had to do this even in the previous iterations of this, because you're going to have a lot more insert processing on that mix, that left-right bus probably, than you are in that vocal chain. So you're going to have to address it somewhere here. And again, I would probably do it at the vocal stem. All right, I believe that's where I've done it here. Sorry for being so sketchy with this. Like I said, I just kind of thought about this before I got on air of how we're going to do this, you know. So yeah, you're going to have to do your vocal blend back up, or vocal stem, delay it to get it in time at the PA matrix, and also get, you know, actually, I got to be honest, now that I'm thinking about it, that might not be the place to do it in this scenario. I'm actually thinking in this scenario, I might want to assess whether the stems are being recorded at the same time and address it, and then also put some additional time on the stems master to get that package in alignment at the PA matrix, right? Might have to do a little after school work on that one and see which is better there. You follow that line of thinking there? Because right now we're doing, you know, I'm adjusting time on the vocal stem to get it in alignment at the PA matrix. So I'm probably actually pushing it out of time of the other stems there. So in this situation, in this one in particular, it might be better to move that clock that is on the vocal stem over to the vocal stems master and do it there. Matter of fact, maybe I can actually do that here. Stand by. I might be able to.
If you're lucky, you would need both.
Yeah,
One
you
to
might.
do the music stem and one to do the total.
Yeah, you very well might. You're right on the money there. Yeah, I'm actually, that drawing is actually wrong. I think, and again, I think I kind of discovered this at the, just before I came on air. I was doing I had kind of this brain moment of, hey, hang on a minute. Yeah, so you can do it in either place, is the irony of it. But you know, you would want to probably do the stem first to make sure it's in alignment with your other stem prints, and then take any residual delay that's needed and do that on the vocal stems master to get it in alignment at the matrix, right? I mean, in this situation, I would tell you what I would do here. I'm probably going to end up going back to this, right? Actually, this. Just going to be easier to manage now. And the ADC helps you out here, right? The ADC is going to keep that last tier in alignment for you. So I'm probably going to go back to this, and then just in my layouts, just keep that instrument stem master and the P-bus master at my fingertips, along with the vocal mix back through. Okay. I know, it's a lot, right? The more flexibility you have, the more challenges you have. All right, let's try to wrap this up here. Try to keep it in. Oh, so I was going to take this reminder this time to remind everybody. Just don't forget now. It's one of these things where if you want to do parallel compression and have it be New York style parallel compression and effects, etc., you kind of really got to want it. I mean, you got to really understand what it's going to bring to the table in terms of sound qualities, etc. But if you want to, bypass a lot of this and just make things much simpler for your setup, and certainly maybe for people that are working for you, etc. Remember, you can go back to parallel compression at every single stage of this as you need it, right? I mean, it's everywhere in the console. So if you're just looking to do simple parallel compression to raise the RMS level of your mix, you can do that in a lot of places here. You don't have to rely on New York style compression to get it. But if you want to do that, if you're really married to that sound and want to do it, it's going to take some work to get it together. And maybe now's the time to say this. This doesn't just apply to venue consoles, guys. Everybody's got this issue. That especially any consoles that are doing bus to bus have this issue, have these issues, right? All right, so let's do some summarizing. As I said in the early parts of this, please do not just turn on all the ADC options and assume you're going to be okay to route freely. You are not. You want to use it as needed and understand what it is addressing and what it is not addressing, and try to think compartmentalized. You have enough processing now to compartmentalize processing into stems and make that really effective. Be really discerning where you use parallel compression, especially New York style parallel compression. You may not want to use that everywhere, but certainly with as we saw kind of last week, doing doing this aux insert thing to be able to do effects processing, etc., on your vocals and things like that works a charm, right? So as long as there's no parallel compression involved there, you'll probably get away with it fine. I'm going to do some investigation of that, honestly, before I sign completely off on this. I'm in the process of rebuilding my template, my console, my mixing template right now to make sure that all of this works together, right? So come up with a way of confirming what you're trying to do. If you want to use FFT, you can do it. If you want to use phase cancellation, polarity cancellation is really what I should call it. It's certainly a valid way to do it on digital consoles because we have sample accuracy. If your console has sample resolution on your input and output delays, some don't. I think last I checked, things like VI7 for Soundcraft and stuff only have like microsecond resolution. They actually don't break it down to sample. So that could be a challenge for you. But by any stretch, find a way to create these polarity reverse cancellations, and your overall phase will improve. And then, as I mentioned earlier, try to deploy a single approach to your auxes for parallel processing, regardless of whether it's parallel compression or parallel effects. Either use the aux plug-in to channel to master concept, that serial parallel thing, and just use the left-right bus, or if you're going to use aux with a plug-in insert, then you can get away with a lot more group use there. But I definitely would not suggest combining the two methodologies there. You can send yourself into a tailspin pretty quick. I've been around the horn with it a few times with it. Okay. Wow. I'd love to say that went as well as I thought it was going to, but it went about as well as I thought it was going to. And it is a lot to put together here. Let's see here. All right, talk to me. Tell me what's scaring you, what's messing with you, what you're worried about, things like that. Anybody want to take the floor?
In the chat for you.
Yeah, I'm sorry, guys. I've been so busy with this. I don't know if I can take it in the chat, but I'll take a look here. Let's see. Okay. Gary, you put one in there. Did I address it verbally? I didn't? Okay. So how do you deal with delay comp when doing immersive? Yeah, you had to ask it, didn't you? You had to ask it. Yeah. So it is a challenge. It is a huge challenge, in my opinion. But the thing you have to remember about immersive is what the end result is going to be, right? Because if we talk about immersive and we're going to do localization with it, meaning in the PA, we're going to localize the drums to a location. We're going to localize instruments to a location. In the majority of those situations, any family of instruments is not going to be coming out of two speakers at the same time. If it is, it's going to be primarily one speaker and not the other, right? So what that means is that in propagation, the families of instruments are going to have some offset anyway, right? Depending on which speaker system you're closer to, those instruments are going to arrive to you at a little bit different time, right? So in terms of what that means in terms of delay compensation on the console is we need to make sure that we have the families of instruments sorted out. If all of my drums are going to be coming out of this speaker system, I've got to make sure that all of my drum inputs are actually exiting the console at the same time and heading to that speaker system. If the keyboards are going to be coming out over here, well, yeah, I want to make sure all my keyboard inputs are coming out at the same time, but they're going to be offset by propagation in the room anyway, right? So do I need to align those two families? It's better if you do. I'll tell you that. It's better if you do, but you can get away with it not being, right? Whereas in a normal situation, in a non-immersive situation, remember all inputs are exiting all speakers at the same time. So it's, in my mind, it's critical that all inputs leave the console at the same time in that situation. Does that answer your question? Yeah. I think what you'll find is that in immersive, you're going to do a lot more manual delay compensation because, as I said earlier, ADC takes care of a lot of things, but it almost always takes care of it at the master bus, right? At a master left-right. In immersive, there is no master left-right for all intents and purposes, right? There's just direct outputs. So ADC is not going to help you there, right? And I think what we're going to see, I'm really, excited and nervous about exploring, how all this ADC stuff works and group to group works for monitor engineering and front of house plus monitor engineering. I think it's going to have some challenges there. That's up next for Lab 24. I'll probably spend another 2 weeks with my head buried in it trying to figure this out. So that's going to be an interesting part there, right? Because a lot of inputs are not going to go to the left-right bus. If you're just doing monitors only, you may not even be using the left-right bus. It's not going to matter anyway. You're just going to use auxes as your master. How does delay compensation handle that? That's going to be a good question. Scott Fahey had to leave. Okay, and
I got a question for you. Sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. Go.
So I'm a monitor guy, so I'm always shooting for less latency. And something that occurred to me in your last talk was that what's to stop me from, like, if I want my vocal to have a clean and a dirty and a slap and a delay and all that stuff, why couldn't I just patch that input 5 times, put the effects as inserts, and just use those as channels and skip the whole traditional send return?
You could just only use one at a time.
Right, and input. Well, if I use the new input alignment, then that's actually going to be the question that I got to dig in on and because right now input alignment only addresses it to the left-right bus. Right? Okay.
Right. So, but we do have that feature in Venue where you can select a number of channels and right-click it and say, put channel delay in and align these channels. And I believe that's going to be the answer to your query there. But I got some other thoughts on it that ADC might be able to handle it. I think depending on where we pick off the signal up to the aux. But I don't want to get too far into that. We'll save it for Lab 24. I'm sure it's going to be a long soak.
Gotcha. That popped into my head watching the last one, and it seemed like it could be a game changer in saving sends and returns.
Sure. Yeah, in that situation, sure. Where you're creating mults and, maybe it's single inputs that you're going to affect, et cetera. At front of house, at least for me, and I'm sure it's because I've been programmed coming through the analog world, I always want my effects processing, whether it's a mult or it's a delay or it's a reverb or whatever, to be post my main vocal fader. Right? If I turn that down, everything goes away. If you do that parallel patch, that's not the case. Right?
Right.
You have to manage all of those separately, right? And there is no real drive send and return. Everything comes right off the input gain there. So that's it's not that it can't be done. You just have to
unless you make an event to control that.
Well, yeah, I guess you could do that. Yeah. That I mean, you could. I shouldn't question that. You could do it where if I'm going to turn down my main fader, it's going to turn down the others as well. Sure, you could probably link those things up as well.
Yeah.
Couldn't you do it as a VCA?
Yes. I'm thinking. I just want to make sure that's right through my head. Yes, but again, there's no real drive characteristic there. You're just turning down faders, right? Like, I'll give you the example, right? So if I double patch my vocal to 2 channels and I say I want one of them to be distorted and the other not, well, in my mind, normally what I want to have happen there is I want to do my vocal equalization, compression, dynamics, and then have that distorted and add it with it. That would not be the case in this situation where it's double patched. It would not follow vocal equalization. It would not follow dynamics. It would not follow fader. It would not follow mute, right? So it's more work, right? So those are the parts of it, in my mind, that you would be missing with the event, et cetera. Could you do it in terms of just keeping it in a phase? Sure.
Thanks.
Yeah, of course. So, seeing all this now, I gotta relay something to you, that was, I think is kind of cool, kind of funny. When we were, in the earlier days of putting together S6L and kind of coming up with the concept and everything, we had these discussions of, well, how many buses is enough buses? And it was, well, okay, who's going to use more than 96 buses? Okay, how many subgroups do we have? Okay, well, let's let them have 48. Who's going to use 48 subgroup buses? Given some of the things I just showed you right there, you could use 48 subgroup buses in a heartbeat, right? So are we going to need more busing in consoles? The answer is yes. The answer is yes. right? Remember, as it sits right now, we couldn't operate a 96 bus console in analog. We couldn't physically operate it. Right? We can only do that in digital. Let's see, what else? Christina, would these stems be going out to a spatializer for immersive speaker setups? Hopefully I answered that question earlier. Any of these stems could be going out to immersive. Absolutely, they could be. You know, you could do them as mono. I would probably do them as mono, but you could do them as stereo if you wanted to do it. There's nothing that says you can't do that. It can be any combination. I would just caution you all, if you're thinking about getting into the immersive thing, and again, it's one of those things, it's not a showstopper, but you know, if you want to be a good engineer and be, you know, have good, just good characteristics to what you're doing, you know, you want to take care of these kind of alignments, because what happens in the spatializer is if you have offsets between inputs, right, or between objects that are going up there that are caused by the console, it throws off the ability of the spatializer to do fold downs, right? It's going to be heard in any kind of fold down. If it folds down to 5.1, if it folds down to stereo, those offsets are going to have the same impact they have on you now in stereo when you don't deal with them. Same thing if you're doing spatialized mono fills in an immersive environment. Well, it's basing that on all of those things arriving at the spatializer at the same time. So if they come out of time, it's going to throw off that spatialization of even a mono system, right? So something to think about for sure. You know, this is not something you want to take super lightly, in my opinion. Thank you guys for clocking in here. I'm sorry this ended up being a long one, almost 2 hours. I knew it was going to really drag on, but thanks for hanging in there with me. Thanks for hanging in with the mistakes, and look for an edited version of this up on the instant replay here soon. So thank you guys for showing up, and I am going to pull the ripcord and say see you later.